All right. I'd like to start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'Hashem Yahushai, Ba'Hashem, Ruach Kudash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is basically Hit the Button 1/15/2026. And pretty much, there's a lot going on. Not sure what direction Spirit's going to have me go, but I have been listening to videos and looking up certain information and just different, ideas and thoughts coming to mind and questions I was asking the chat, trying to see what the chat would give me. And pretty much there was one question I asked it where I asked it 3 times and it wouldn't answer it. So, I want to, deal with that also because these devils are, trying to hide their agenda, even though it's out in plain sight. They're still, in the process of deniable plausibility. And, even though they're not really too concerned about secrecy anymore, they're still sending out a lot of, deflecting information out there, and the redirection as far as the information goes, so that the people that are searching these things now in the information highway on the information highway can be confused, because once the average person that started to learn about certain things reads, well, that's just a conspiracy theory, or that didn't really happen, or that didn't occur, or this person doesn't exist, they pretty much dismiss everything else because that's how they've been trained. But nevertheless, let's see what we can start with. I just want to hit this point here. I typed in because yesterday there was a post that was sent to me that the Iranian real had collapsed, and I didn't have any other information on it. So this morning, what I did was I typed in, did the Iranian real collapse? Yes, the Iranian real has experienced a severe collapse, reaching historic lows against the US dollar in late 2025 and early 2026, losing significant value and triggering economic hardship, soaring inflation over 40%, and widespread protests as purchasing power plummeted and prices for essential goods became unaffordable. And this is what's going to cause, uncertainty. Is going to cause desperation, and it's going to cause the uproars of the people, because people could go without certain items, they can go without, not being able to buy clothes and not being able to do this, that, the other. But one thing they can't go without is food and, being able to pay their essential bills, like light, rent, water, or whatever the case they have to pay. And especially if they can't get any food. So when the currency of a particular nation starts to be devalued, it takes more of that currency to be able to buy the necessary essential things of life to live. And when that happens, most people are working class. Most people are not, in the, top tier of making money. They're just pretty much just, making it check to check, or if they do have savings, they have a little savings, just a little nest egg in case, some emergency happens, and they're pretty much running through that money like water, and it's, it's the effects are starting to be felt by these people, and that's why they're protesting. And this is all part of biblical prophecy, where it speaks about the uproars of the people. And this is what we see happening right now worldwide. Some stuff they're speaking on, other stuff they're not reporting, but you better believe there's a lot going on, even more than we see. All right, it says this currency crisis driven by sanctions, regional tensions like the 2025 conflict with Israel, and mismanagement has eroded savings and sparked discontent against the government, with reports of civil unrest and calls for regime change. And this is pretty much what causes that. When the population of a particular country is not doing well, their they are in a desperate state. They can't feed themselves. They can't pay their bills. No, they're looking to the government for help, and they're looking at the government as being corrupt or whatever the case may be. And eventually, they protest, and eventually, civil unrest breaks out to remove the current leader of their country that's mismanaging the money. And this is what we see going on worldwide. And Iran is definitely doing what America's doing, because if you look up, we've done the research before I typed it in. Is Iran going digital? And it's going to tell you yes. Russia's going digital, China's going digital. So all these nations that are so-called at odds with America and the enemy of America, they're all in bed together. They're all doing the same thing. They're all pushing for this digital monetary system worldwide. Now, another question I asked was, has the Iranian rial recovered? No, the Iranian rial has not recovered. It is experiencing severe ongoing depreciation, and that depreciation causes inflation and eventually causes hyperinflation. That's why, as of yesterday, I'm not sure if I still have that post. You know what? Let me see. How could I word this? How many? I'll come right back to this. How many Iranian rial to a dollar? Let me check. Let me see what comes up to a dollar. Come on, man. To a dollar. As mid-January 2026, the official rate of $1 to Iranian rial, our IPR, is around 42,000 IRR. But the parallel or open market rate is much higher, fluctuating around 1.4 to 1.5 million of these Iranian rials, pretty much to a dollar. And as it continues to depreciate, it continues to drop. Eventually the monetary system is going to tank. Like you had the Zimbabwean dollar that was worthless. You had during the time of Germany, you had the Weimar Deutschmark that crashed, and once it crashed, it was worthless. It was more affordable to burn the money than to use that money to try to buy wood to keep your home warm. So let's go back. So it says, no, the Iranian rial has not recovered. It has experienced severe ongoing depreciation, hitting record lows against the US dollar in early 2026. And this is what America wants to do. It wants to destabilize these nations to keep the dollar strong. And that's why it's going in, destabilizing, taking over their resources to have more tangible assets to be able to back up the fiat currency of the US dollar, driven by sanctions, high inflation, and economic instability, with plans for redenomination aimed at managing but not solving underlying issues. The currency's value has plummeted dramatically over the past year, severely eroding purchasing power for Iranians and making imports expensive. And the people are feeling the effects, and that's why they're the scriptures speak about every hand of the wicked being against them. All right, so, and ultimately the goal is to have everything go digital, because as we read in Revelation 13, the MOTB with the micro CHIP, they want the world micro CHIPed to be able to function, to be able to buy or sell. And that's why I asked the chat, right? I said, did Aaron Russo have a meeting with Nick Rockefeller about the future of money and the implanting of a micro CHIP for all humans on Earth, right? This is a question I asked. Because I was, sitting here listening to videos, looking up stuff, trying to get an idea for a lesson, and nothing was really coming. So everything kind of was leaning more towards, the economy, which is very important in prophecy. So this is what the chat said. Here's what we know from available sources about the claim that Aaron Russo met Nick Rockefeller and discusses the future of money and implanting a micro CHIP in all humans, and what is substantiated fact versus unverified / conspiracy narrative. What Aaron Russo claimed. Russo said he met a man called Nick Rockefeller. According to interviews, especially a 2006 conversation Russo had with broadcaster Alex Jones, Russo described that a lawyer he knew introduced him to a man he referred to as Nick Rockefeller, allegedly in the 1990s, because Russo's film Mad as Hell had caught the person's attention. So notice how they're putting it in a sense of he claims, this fictional, like a fictional person, and they approached him and they had a conversation. He wanted to meet him, but this is what happened, and you can see in Aaron Russo's eyes when he was alive that he was a man that was sincere. You could see that what he was telling was coming from the heart. It wasn't something that he was making up, But when you try to research it, they'll say that this person didn't exist and that wasn't true. It's a conspiracy theory. But it is what it is, because it's only going to work on the weak-minded. And how do we know it's real? Because it goes along with Bible prophecy. And we understand the scriptures, and we understand that once, an individual, matter of fact, let me pull this up just to hold on to it. When an individual, I think that's Exodus 21. When an individual, 21, wants to become a servant for life, they will have to have a particular device, which is in scriptures called an awl, bored through their ears, whichever ear they did. And then that would signify that particular individual was a servant for life to this particular master. This is what the micro-CHIP is all about. It's about branding the cattle of the world, the people of the world that they call cattle. Goy, I don't know why they use Goy. Goya is just literally means nation, but they use it as a term for cattle, because cattle are known as property, and cattle, which are property, are branded by the master's brand, depending on who owns those particular cattle. And this is what they want to do. They want to brand the whole world with that micro-CHIP, which would be a license, for lack of better words, or a certificate of ownership, or a license of ownership to these international banking families who control everything. All these different corporations you see are controlled by very few. But it makes it seem like you have the ability to free trade and all this stuff. But really, when it boils down to it, all of these different corporations that are so-called in competition with each other are all part of the same group. Because I believe it was either Nick Rockefeller or one of them international bankers that said competition is a sin. Matter of fact, let's just type that in. Who said competition is a sin? There we go. It says the famous quote, "Competition is a sin," is attributed to American industrialist John D. Rockefeller, which was the father, of the Rockefeller family. That was like the patriarch of the modern Rockefellers today. All right. So John D. Rockefeller said that the founder of Standard Oil, who believed that ruthless competition was wasteful and that consolidating industries under one efficient control, was a moral imperative to serve a public better and create wealth, and even while ruthlessly eliminating rivals. And that's what it's about: eliminating competition, eliminating rivals, having everything come up under one umbrella. And this is why everything is going digital, because digital means that although you have different, countries or different, companies controlling these different digital assets, eventually they're going to merge everything into one. All they have to do is get it in that pool, the digital pool. Once it gets in the digital pool, everything could be merged, because then there's total control there. And that's why people are buying into the Bitcoin thing and the this coin and that Ethereum and all this stuff, because, blockchain and all that, because this isn't connected to that, pretty much is not centralized. But eventually this, what they plan on doing, centralizing everything. This is what the US dollar was created for, to create instability on the earth, financial instability, so that they can, bring in a new world order under new world currencies. And that new world currency is going to be digital. This is why everything is going digital. You see? So going back to the chat, and the Lord's will, we're going to get to the scriptures. It says, verse number 2. In these accounts, Rockefeller allegedly told Russo about cashless society in which everyone would have an RFID microchip implanted carrying all their financial data. And is that not a fact? Can people not get, or do people have implantable devices in them already? Can they not buy or sell with those implantable devices? This is not something new. This is something that's been out there. And that physical money would disappear. And that's what they want, because they don't want people to be able to do business outside of that infrastructure. Because outside of the infrastructure, they can't control. Inside of that infrastructure, they can control. You don't behave, what happens? They shut you out. Just like Nick Rockefeller told Aaron Russo. If they don't comply, then what they do is they turn off your micro CM. And guess what? You can't function until they turn you back on, until they put you back online. And you will have to comply. And this is why it says that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the MARK, or the number of the beast. See? So Russo described that that this was supposedly a plan of a one world government and control system, right? And then it goes on to say that he didn't exist, right? And I'm gonna read on, right? I'm gonna read on. But before I read on, there's a quote, right, by David Rockefeller. It's all over the place. David Rockefeller quotes, quotable quote, right? It says, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. So what was a big discretion about? Not letting their plans for world domination, world control, taking monetary control of the whole entire planet, economic control of the entire planet out in the public for 40 years as they were allowed to attend these meetings. So they knew about it way back then, right? It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. Why? Because everything was still in the, you could say, infancy stage. They were planning, they were doing, having those think tanks, trying to get everything off the ground. And it would have been impossible to do that if the public eyes were on it. So they wanted them, they were glad. And by the way, they own all of these different publications. CFR back in 1921, the first thing they did when they came in, when they were established, was what? Buy up all means of media. Whether it was, whatever publication, whether it was a magazine, newspaper, radio, whatever. And they still control it still. This is why they want to control what people hear in the news, so that they can control what people believe and think, drawing their attention, diverting their attention away from the goals that they really have. But now it doesn't matter, because the plan's already in place, the infrastructure is in place, and they're slowly but surely moving towards that stranglehold of the digital system worldwide. It says, but the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a what? World government. So this is all that Aaron Russo was telling, Alex Jones, that Nick Rockefeller told him. They were heading towards a world government, right? The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to who? To the bankers, to the national auto-determination practice in past centuries. In other words, by the people being able to be sovereign, being able to be ruled and governed by themselves, having different governments and different monarchies or whatever govern their people as they saw fit. So he wants to eliminate all of that and bring it under one banner, to where the super elite which is a small handful, 1% they call them, control everything, and they distribute out what they want to the people. And you know they're going to distribute out crumbs. This is why in the WEF, the former head of the WEF, Klaus Schwab, said, "You shall own nothing, and you will be happy." Then you had first time I heard it was Christopher Green, AMTV. I believe he's an insider. He said that you had something called the Cloward-Piven strategy, and the Cloward-Piven strategy pretty much is, use the welfare system, make it crash on itself, so that between the laws and the regulations and all that, make it all crash upon itself, so they can introduce a new, yearly income, which goes back to what? UBI, Universal Basic Income, because that's the wave of the future. You have the movie 1984. You have total control, constant surveillance, everyone working. No freedom of thought, no independent thought. Everything just centered around Big Brother, and this is what they're doing. So he said that they prefer, supernational sovereignty of an intellectual elite, meaning the elite controlling it, and world bankers is surely preferable to national order determination practice in past centuries. David Rockefeller. So they want a new world order. So here, Chad says, number 2, in these accounts, Rockefeller allegedly told Russo about a cashless society in which everyone would have an RFID microchip implanted carrying all their financial data, and that physical money would disappear. Russo described that this was supposedly a plan of a what? One world government and control system. Now, out of one of the horse's mouths, he said that this is the plan, and that he was happy that these publications held that secrecy for 40 years. But now that the world is more sophisticated, so-called, they're ready for a few elite to take over the financial power of the earth, instead of having everyone being determined, to govern themselves, have their own sovereignty. So what's different between what so-called Aaron Russo, right? They say that Aaron Russo made this up. So what's different between what Nick Rockefeller told him than what David Rockefeller said? This is public. These are actual quotes. Are they going to say that David Rockefeller didn't exist? Right? It says number 3, Russo also claimed this person told him in advance about, and before I go to that, before I read on, number 3, right? I typed in this same part of this quote, right? David Rockefeller in the chat, as you can see here. Did David Rockefeller say this? We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. And what did he mean by it? Right? It's what I asked Chat. 3 times I asked. Chat GPT isn't designed to provide this type of content. Why not? Isn't it, public record that David Rockefeller said this? And I asked it, as you can see, 3 of 3. I asked it 3 times, and it wouldn't give me, that information. Why? Because the Rockefellers, which are small hats, that changed their names, they pretty much, the small hats are really the ones that control the world, even though they say they don't. And ChatGPT is designed and being designed to favor the small hats above anyone else. All right, so let's go back up to number 3. It said Russo also claimed this person told him in advance about an upcoming event, which Russo linked to 911. We'll skip that. These claims came from Russo's narrative in fringe interviews and conspiracy-linked video, often via Alex Jones and related sites. These have circulated extensively in conspiracy theory community. So you see how they throw their conspiracy theory in there, and then the average person hears that, and they dismiss everything else. What is not verified but reliable evidence, there is no credible historic record confirming that the Rockefeller family, as a powerful elite cabal, openly discussed plans to implant microchips in every person as described by Russo. Of course, they ain't gonna make it public because that's their plan. The secret counsel of the wicked. Nick Rockefeller, as a powerful family insider who shared secret plans, is not verified. Independent investigation into the Rockefeller family lineage shows no well-documented person by that name directly tied to the core Rockefeller fortune leadership. You see how them devils operate? They claim that someone from a major elite group confided long-term secrets of world control to Russo years before publishing them is only supported by Russo's own testimony in those interviews. And then you see how the things that Aaron Russo said, that this person said to him, that they're saying didn't exist, Nick Rockefeller, you're seeing them come to pass right now before our eyes. Here it is, 2026. They have all this information. They have all this. Why is the world going digital if these are not the plans? You know, why is everything being centralized to be in digital? Why are they trying to get rid of, physical money? Why are they making it so hard for people that when they go to the grocery stores now in different stores to not be able to pay cash in these different, self-checkouts, but have to stand in the longer line with people there to be able to pay cash with? It's a matter of inconvenience. They want to inconvenience the people so that those that are willing to pay with the card or with their phone or whatever can go through the lines quicker. It says, and according to the discussion on Wikipedia's talk pages and analysis by researchers, Russo's narrative is considered part of conspiracy theory circles with no external verification. And of course, they're not going to come out and say they did it, even though they indirectly they do. We just read the quote by David Rockefeller that said that they, plan on pretty much taking over the global monetary control, and that they were glad that these individuals that attended their meetings didn't bring out or divulge the secret. It says, and the interview was hosted by sources like Alex Jones, who are not generally regarded as reliable for factual accuracy. Independent critics and fact checkers note that there's no documentation of a Rockefeller family member with the influence described, nor confirmation that Russo's claims were ever substantiated outside these fringe interviews. And you know what that's called? That's called plausible deniability. You're caught in a straight up lie, but you're not going to admit it. Plausible deniability is the ability to deny knowledge of or responsibility for an action, even if it occurred by creating enough distance or ambiguity, lack of direct evidence. So just because there's a lack of direct evidence and no one actually, is actually, saying that this is, no one's on record saying that this is what they're doing. What is the, evidence in the world, as far as the economy or finance? What is the direction of the world going to? Digital. Why? Doesn't the micro chip, RFID micro chip, have something to do with something digital? You can't take the RFID or the micro chip and just play with that, as far as just without the infrastructure, without a reader. You're not just going to take it and just throw it. So it's going to be in people. Right now, people have it. This is why Bishop Nathaniel's changing his tune, saying that the phone, indirectly saying that the phone is an MOTB. You pay with it with your right hand, spinning the narrative like he always does, like Oil Can Harry, Country Slicker Joe. But the Lord knows everything. The Lord sees everything. So it says that a denial seems believable, often used by superiors to avoid accountability for a subordinate's misconduct. It's a tactic to shield individuals, often high-ranking officials, from blame by claiming ignorance or lack of direct involvement, making it difficult to prove their complicity. But all we have to do is look at prophecy and then look at the status of the world and the direction that the world is going in economically. Okay, so Exodus 21, I'll start at 1. The point is a little further down. It says, now these are the judgments which thou shalt set before them. If thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. Right? And if he came in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master have given him a wife, and she have borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her masters, and he shall go out by himself. And that's why that child support shit is wicked, because we are all slaves. We all belong, to Esau through the birth certificates, your social security numbers, all of that. So technically, when a man and a woman break up, Esau's supposed to take care of that woman because she's still a servant. He's supposed to take care of them children because we're still servants. They're still servants. Not saying that you shouldn't take care of your children, take care of your family. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying this is what the scriptures say. This man could not take his woman and his children with him. So who they would be in the care of who? The master. Providing what? Shelter, food, clothing, so on and so forth. If we're going to go by the laws, the statutes, the commandments, did you pay your child support, brother? Hey. And if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free. Here's where the stipulation comes in. And these devils understand that debt creates slaves. Let's see. Does debt create slaves? Yes, debt can create slavery, specifically through debt bondage or debt slavery slash peonage, a widespread form of modern slavery where people are forced to work to pay off a debt. Right. In this case, you had something called indentured servants that would pay off a debt to a certain time period, like we're reading right now, the Hebrew servants. They were indentured servants. It says often with exploitative conditions that make repayment impossible. Right. And this is why Esau, through the IMF, lends these countries that are in financial turmoil exorbitant amount of money to be able to get out of that, condition that they're in, knowing damn well that these nations cannot pay that money back. And then on top of that, interest piles up on top of that. So what happens? When they can't pay it, then here comes Esau, here comes the American, corporations setting up shop, taking over the resources, the land, the people, and the riches of that particular land. And they understand that. They understand that debt creates slaves. It says trapping them and sometimes their families in perpetual servitude. And this is what we're reading about the man. But in this case, the man, he willingly wants to become a servant for life because of his master, his wife, and his children, which can involve no pay, abuse, and the debt growing endlessly. Yeah, because there's no way to pay. You cannot pay a debt with a debt. That's why Klaus Schwab said, you shall own nothing and be happy. And this is why when the Federal Reserve System was established and the US dollar was established, these devils knew that the people weren't going to pay that debt. He wasn't concerned with collecting the debt because he knew on the long run, on the far end of it, he was going to get paid anyway because they would have the world in total slavery. This goes into that scripture in Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, about thick clay, these heavy debts. It says this system where labor is pledged as security for a loan, and the scripture speaks about security, speaks about a pledge. When you give security or you give a pledge, that's pretty much giving your word as collateral and giving yourself as collateral. And like they say, don't let your mouth, write a check your ass can't cash. It says for a loan, exploits, the system where labor is pledged as security for a loan, exploits vulnerability like poverty, discrimination, and migration, making it difficult to escape even though debt slavery is illegal in many places. But see, they have laws in the books. Woe to him that decree unrighteous decrees and that write grievances which they have prescribed. And that's what the legislation is all about. Matter of fact, I'm going to hold on to that because I want to get back to this. Let me get back to this. Exodus 21, right? And 6. Then his master shall bring him unto the judges. If you can have witnesses. He shall also bring him to the door. And this is why it was what? Voluntary. Or unto the doorpost. And his master shall bore his ear through with what? An awl. And he shall serve him forever. Now let's look up the word all. Right? The word is maratazai, which goes back to the root word ratazai. Ratazai is bore, to punch a hole, to drill a hole. The word ma ratazai, ma is of or from, ratazai is to bore, of or from to bore. Right? All, boring instrument. Now, what do you do with a boring instrument? You drill a hole. All. There you go. It looks like a ice pick. Okay. What is an oops? What is an all used for? An awl is very versatile. Is a versatile hand tool, primarily used for making holes, scribbling lines, crafting and repair tasks, scraping. So here we got what? Making holes, which goes into the word karagma, which means to cut into. Let's get that. And if you're tired of hearing this, then you can move on. There's booty shaking videos, there's titties all over the place, ass all over the place. Revelation 13:16, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. And what's that purpose for? For the purpose of verse 17, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. All right. And when you go to that word mark, you have the word there, karagma. All right. Karagma, a stamp, an imprinted mark, just like an awl was used, or you have an ice pick to carve into or cut into. You also had the chisel to what? To carve wood, or to carve stone, or to carve whatever the case may be. It says an imprinted mark of the mark stamped on the forehead or the right hand as badge of the followers of the anti-Messiah, which is no such thing as one anti-Messiah. There's many anti-Messiahs. This whole system is anti-Messiah because they want to, prick and put foreign devices into the people of the Lord and the people of the world. It says the mark branded upon it. So it's a badge. Like you have a badge, a work badge. See the badge. A distinctive emblem worn as a mark of office, membership, achievement, license, employment, etc. So that's what they want. So this micro C here would be a badge, your new slave pass, to be able to maneuver in the system, that these devils are putting in place. And it's all, the evidence is overwhelming. It's everywhere. And on top of that, it says the mark branded upon horses, the thing carved. sculpture, graven work of idolatrous images. So in essence, all the mark is to carve something into someone. And then the tool that's used to carve something into it is, the delivery system, which goes into the word karax, which the word karax for here from karaso, to sharpen to a point. Why do you have to sharpen to a point? Because you're cutting into something, right? Akin to grapho, which grapho is right. Matter of fact, let's look up karax, a pale or stake, a palisade or ramp. And what is it? A pale or a stake or a palisade? It's like you have when someone says claiming your stakes, right? Or you have a plot of land that you're looking into, and they section that land off. You have these sticks that are cut at the end. They're a point at the end to what? To drive it into the ground. That's a palisade. That's a stake, and that's what. And what is that? That's the delivery system that Esau is going to use to push that microseed into people. And there's people that already have it in them. A lot of people in Sweden have it. All they're doing is pushing in place this system. While the world is in total turmoil and chaos financially, they're going ahead with their agenda. And pretty much, look, y'all want stability in your life once again? Well, take this microchip, everything will start all over again. It's a new reset. And what do you think the majority of people are going to do? That are catching hell, that can't pay their bills, that want to eat, they want to go back to work or whatever the case is. They're going to take it voluntarily. But then they're gonna come, and eventually make it mandatory to fulfill prophecy also. To the ones that resist, be put to death, including the men of the Lord. Grapho, right? This is the last of the root words, and the word grapho is to write, with reference to the form of the letter, right? Where is it? Right here, to commit to writing things not to be forgotten, write down, record, or record. And this pretty much would be the information that would be in this particular device that was delivered by the karax, which is the charagma. And it was all set up to do what? Buying and selling. That's why the 17th verse, which a lot of them major groups wouldn't touch at one time. They wouldn't touch the 17th verse. They'll go to the 16th verse, say it's a embargo, it's Christianity, it's sin in all its forms, and they wouldn't touch the 17th verse. Now they're going into the 17th verse because why? The digital system is out, and they're trying to cover their ass. They don't want to look stupid. Too late. Said no, and then no man might buy or sell save he that had the MARK or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And this goes hand in hand with what we were, okay. Was it here? Yep, Isaiah 10:1. Woe to them that decree unrighteous decrees and that write grievances which they are prescribed. And this is how they're speaking as a dragon. This was all set up. Legislation. Every time an empire was ruling, their legislation was enforced by their military, by their so-called police of the time. And anyone that was against it would either get put to death or they would get locked up or have to pay a fine. This is what we see happening right before our eyes worldwide. So we go to the word decree, which the word decree is a law, right? Chakwak, decree, resolve, statute, action prescribed, right? And the statute is what? This is a law or sub-laws. Chakwak, to cut out, decree, inscribe. So it's something that's written down. It's something that's put into legislation. And what is this legislation meant to do? It's meant to deprive, the people, make them poor, deprive them of their, of the ability to be able to, you know, survive, you know? Verse 2, to turn aside the needy from judgment and to take away the right from the poor of my people, especially the Israelites. This is what it's meant to do. These laws, this legislation, this draconian legislation is so-called unconstitutional, And there was something that the Bishop Manatazak has sent me. Let me see if I could find that. Right. It's an Instagram post where it says the Supreme Court unanimously rules that police may enter a home without a warrant. You're supposed to have a Fourth Amendment right to be protected in your property effects and things from unreasonable searches and seizures. But it says the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be one of the highest courts, unanimously rules that police may enter a home without a warrant to render emergency aid when they have an objectively reasonable basis to believe someone inside faces serious harm, rejecting any probable cause requirement. So pretty much the so-called laws that were set up to protect you are now being rescinded, are now being overridden, by other draconian legislation under the guise of emergency. And why is this happening? Because they're doing away with the Constitution completely, dismantling it completely, so that people can't have anything to fall back on. This is why ICE is doing what they do. So it's to turn aside the needy from judgment and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey and that they may rob the fatherless. And this is what they're doing. And the Lord is going to judge these devils for that. Because it's the so-called elite. But then we call them out and they'll say, nope, conspiracy theorists, you're making that up. There's no such thing as this, but everything is pointing to it. All the evidence is pointing to that. These devils are turning the world or directing the world to a digital slave, pretty much the digital slave global plantation. But they'll still deny it. You got your plausible deniability. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. That's talking about the international bankers. Your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eating, because the ones that are set up that have all this wealth, they didn't get that honestly. They got that through fraud. They got that through thievery, robbery, same thing, murder, They didn't get it right. Now, I don't know how true it is, but there was an individual that had put up a video on Instagram and said that the Astor family, going back to the Titanic back in the early 1900s, the Astor family and all of those different rich families that went on that ship that were drowned were actually Moorish. They were Moorish. They were actually Jakes, well-to-do Jakes, up in status Jakes. And what happened was, once they sunk it and got rid of them, which is all the heirs, they in turn took on, their identity. I don't know how true that is. It's something I heard. It's worth looking into. But knowing how these devils operate, it's not far-fetched. So there was one Jake that they couldn't erase. So that's the only one that they'll speak on, that he was a Jake that was actually on that ship, because they couldn't erase his records. But the other ones, according to what the individual was saying, they were all Moorish, those high top rich families. And then Esau came in there and took over that name. And of course, they took over the riches. And that's how these devils operate. That's what the Lord said, he's going to bring shameful spewing on your glory. So it says, your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be witness against you. Right? Gold and silver doesn't rust, doesn't canker, but the where you got it, that's the rust on it. That's the corrosion on it. That's the corruption on it. And you have to pay because you shed people's blood. Going back to what's that movie called? Something of the flower of the something. I can't think of it. It's a pretty long title. And that happened the same year that Black Wall Street was burnt down. Same year, you know. And it was the Gadites that were given a particular plot of land that was thought to be barren, crappy, but they found out there was oil on it. So these devils went up in there, married into the Gadite families, just killed all of the heirs so that they could take over that wealth. And that's what you devils do over and over again. Osage, I think, the Osage Nation, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I believe it was Osage Nation, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. You know, it's what these devils do. Black Wall Street, it was well-to-do Jakes, Judites, that they came in and they destroyed it on their pretense because they were jealous. You know? Okay. Yeah, they have the set up. It says, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped. Yeah, because that's how the Lord's going to destroy you. Killers of the flower moon. The water, bro. The water. Killers of the flower moon. It says, and you shall eat your flesh as it were fire, and they shall eat your flesh as it were fire, because that's how the Lord's going to destroy you. Fire not blown, which is those missiles and the lasers from the chariots. You have heaped treasures together for the last days. This is what you did. You heaped treasures together for the last days. But guess what? You sinned against your soul. Let's go to Habakkuk, chapter 2, and verse 9. I started 8. Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee. Yeah, this goes hand in hand with the dead shall raise up, or something like that. And the chief of the nations in Isaiah 14, this goes hand in hand with that. It says, because of men's blood and for the violence of the land and of the city and of all that dwell therein. Because you shed nothing, blood is nothing in your sight. So it says you don't hate blood, guess what? Blood is going to pursue you. It says, woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house. Yeah, and what did you do? You cut off many people, you destroy many people. You ruined lives. You took over inheritances. It says that he may set his nest on high, and this is what you did. You set your nest on high. You're on top of the world right now. You can't tell you devils nothing. You're on top of the world. You have everything. It says that he may be delivered from the power of evil, right? Because evil is bad times, or hard times. Let's see what it says for the word evil there. And I'm going to go to the word right, yeah, which is evil. Bad evil. Let me go to, let's see what the NLT says. What sorrow awaits you who build big houses with money gained dishonestly? And that's your devil. You type in right now, you go online, you type in Rockefeller, mansion, right? Oh, Rockefeller. I'm sorry, Rothschild. I'm lowballing. Rothschild mansion, right? Let's see what we come up with. Boom. Look at that. Now, did they get this? Because they were, they worked so hard for it. They put all their eggs in one basket, and tried their luck, and all of a sudden, one day their ship came in. No, they got that. Look at this old decrepit devil. Motherfucker. I didn't want to do that because I know it's going to look like shit. Look at that. But he looks like shit anyway. Let me see if I can get another picture. This old crusty, rusty devil. Look at these devils. Like, they're so benevolent. You know? The way you got this was through wickedness. Look at this. Devils acting like they're noble and, and these, they're ethical and, they have it all together. But how did you get all this stuff? You got it through corruption. You got it through thievery. You didn't get it by right. And that's why you're going to turn it all over. Right? So it says, NLT again, what sorrow awaits you who build big houses with money gained dishonestly. You believe your wealth will buy you security, putting your family's nest beyond the reach of danger. You think that you're not going to get touched. And you're right. Financially, you're not going to get touched in this time. Even John Todd said that they want to implode the economy of the world and still be financially stable to withstand it. They have enough money to do that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're in their bunkers right now, eating caviar, drinking, expensive, wine and different cognacs, going back to, to the BC era. I wouldn't be surprised. But eventually, that's going to be the last stop. One of these days, when the Lord, once this whole system goes in place, the MOTB system, and World War III is in full bloom and Yahweh Shai comes back, one of these days, you're going to be visited in those bunkers. You're going to have your last meal. You're going to be talking shit. Yeah, get ready, babe. We're getting ready to go up there and set everything back up, plan B. And then what do you know? Boom, they kick in the door, wave in the 4-4, knocking, busting that big ass vault door off and coming up in there and rounding you devils up into captivity for 1,000 years. How do you like them apples? And it's prophecy. It says NIV, woe to him who builds his house by unjust gain, setting his nest on high to escape the clutches of ruin. And you're not going to escape the clutches of ruin. You're going to escape for the time being, but then you're going to go to the real ruins. It's back at the bottom where you belong, you goddamn devil. Bases of men. Thou hast consulted shame to thy house by what? Cutting off many people, and hast sinned against thy soul. What Yahweh shall I say? What can a man give in exchange for his soul? Nothing. It says, for the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer. Right, because the Lord is going to destroy this place. Woe to him that buildeth the town with blood and establisheth the city by iniquity. Why? Because it's going to be destroyed by Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. First, the Lord is going to, expose you. Then he's going to destroy you. Behold, and he's already exposing you. Behold, is it not of the Lord of hosts that the people, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, that the people shall labor in the very fire, and the people shall weary themselves for very vanity? Yeah, because everything you're doing to set up your system of the future, thinking you're going to live forever or thinking you're going to rule forever, is all vain. So now, let's go back to James 5:3. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped treasures together for the last days, but you sinned against your soul. Behold, the hire of the laborers, which are the what? The workers, who have reaped down your fields. Matter of fact, let me look up this word laborers. Let's see what the Greek word is ergates, which is synonymous with the word aimal in the Hebrew, ergates. See, a workman, a laborer, usually one who works for hire, especially an agricultural worker, one who does a worker perpetrator. So a worker, somebody that works, they're crying. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. So the Lord hears this. That's why he's going to judge you. You have lived in pleasure on the earth and have been wanting. You have been careless, and you're even becoming more and more careless. You're not even tactful anymore in your actions. You're just pretty much doing whatever the hell you want, whenever you want. Using that maniac in the White House. It says, you have nourished your hearts as in the day of slaughter, right? Like when you have a feast, you have the slaughter, people are eating, they all, drunk and stuffed and falling asleep, come to itis. That's how you are. You have more than heart could wish, and you still want more. It still ain't enough. God damn. You have condemned and killed the just, and he does not resist you. And there's nothing that we could do but wait on Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. We have no might outside of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai to come and help us. That's why it says, when an enemy shall come in like a flood, then the Spirit of the Lord shall lift up a standard against him. And that's what we're waiting for. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say, Shalom.